history interview conducted for the Witness to War, Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
My name is Paul Carlson. I live in Orleans on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. I'm 70 years old. I served in Vietnam with the 1st Marine Division as an artilleryman, later on as a military policeman. I originally got drafted, and because the Marine Corps had a 2-year enlistment in 1967, I was able to enlist in the Marine Corps. And years later, I have bragging rights, I guess.
Where did you first grow up?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and moved to Queens in about 1951. And I went through high school in New York City.
What did you enjoy doing as a child?
Well, it depends on what you consider a child. But we vacationed every summer in South Wellfleet and lived on the Ocean Beach. During high school, I had a professional rock and roll band, a very well-known, popular New York City teen band. It's now called a society band. We played bar mitzvahs and church dances, senior proms, and outside of schooling, that was what I did. Had a band.
What year were you drafted?
1967 in the fall.
And how old were you?
19.
What war and branch of service did you serve in?
I'm a Marine, and I served in Vietnam from June 1968 to July 1969. 13-month tour.
What was your rank and where did you serve?
I'm a non-commissioned officer. The lowest rank, I'm a corporal. I was a squad leader. And where did I serve? I went through training, the East Coast, the West Coast, Camp Pendleton, flew to Japan, Okinawa, and landed in Da Nang and went almost due west of there and served about 2 or 3 miles from the Laotian border, which is the abutting country.
What do you remember about your first days of service?
Well, this is tricky. Do I tell this story or don't I? I got off the transit plane, a big 707 jet at the Da Nang airfield, and I had to use the bathroom. And there were 2 whole outhouses. Well, I opened up this outhouse door. I sat down on one of the poles on a wood platform. The door opened. This woman put this big cloth sack down, jumped up on top, squatted down, did her thing, and then left. And I thought, okay, the outhouses in this country are co-ed. That was my first experience in Vietnam.
Where did
A little hard to make that up, you know.
Where were you first deployed?
Hill 10, due west of Da Nang at the Laotian border, with a cannon, a 105 millimeter howitzer that would fire 25 pounds of explosives about 6.5 miles.
What was your job or assignment?
To load and fire the gun.
Could you tell us about your most memorable experiences, good or bad?
I had an interesting talk with a psychiatrist about this years ago, who was a staff sergeant during the Battle of the Bulge. Then he came home, went to medical school, and became a psychiatrist. At 94 years old, he still had 4 or 5 active patients. That's pretty impressive, brilliant. What is still ingrained in our brains are these surprise images. Have you ever been to the top of the Empire State Building or anything like that? Well, it is so dramatic that that's planted in your brain forever. And those are the kind of images that I will always have, every last little detail.
Did you ever sustain any injuries?
Yes. My first night With the artillery battery, I was assigned for the first week or two to sit in back of a 50 caliber machine gun. And I was sitting there looking out and going, hey, the sun was setting and a bullet took a little piece out of the bottom of my left ear. Did I get a Purple Heart? No. I would have been laughed off the firebase. Oh, you got a boo-boo. We were expected to dress our own wounds. We only went to sickbay to get medical help if we were ordered or carried. That was the code of conduct.
How did you stay in touch with your family?
By U.S. mail. The postage was free.
Did you always have all the supplies you needed?
No. In a huge battle one day, I ran out of ammo to put in my cannon. And it is the stupidest feeling you could ever imagine. Having a big gun with nothing to put in it. Yeah, no, it was... The Marine Corps survives by not having much. Sounds like a contradiction, but it's the way it is.
How did you and other people entertain themselves?
A lot of guys had musical instruments. I had a cheap wooden guitar, and we played cards. It was pretty simple stuff.
Would you ever have time off, and what would you do during that time?
Not in Vietnam. I felt like I was on duty all of the time. You did everything with a buddy. You were never alone. And you made a personal arrangement. Hey, I'll sleep for a couple hours. Will you stay on watch for me? So there was never... However, as part of a tour in Vietnam, you were given what's called rest and recuperation, R&R, about 6 days. And I chose to take mine in Thailand, and I'm very glad I did. Bangkok, Thailand is a very special place, and I'm thrilled that I got to spend almost a week there.
Did you have any experiences ever with any of the natives in Vietnam, the natives?
Well, I was sent to Vietnamese language school and reassigned to the law office in the 1st Marine Division as an interpreter. It's a very difficult language. Most of what I could do was only in writing. Just to give you an idea, Ciao Ba is hello to a married woman. Ciao Ba is hello trash can. Did you notice the difference?
No.
One of them, the ba went down, ba. The other one, the ba went up. That's how difficult of a language it is.
Could you describe your daily routine in the military?
2 hours on, 2 hours off all night, sitting on guard duty or on post, and then performing whatever your job was.
What did your family or friends think when you were first enlisting?
Well, I didn't enlist, I was drafted. I did everything to avoid the draft. I did not particularly want to end up in the Army and go into war. So there was no way I could get out of it, so I made a conscious choice to enlist in the Marine Corps. Years later, I found out the recruiter did something terribly wrong. Rather than throw my "you must report to be inducted" letter out and enlist me as a Marine, he was not authorized to do that. But it took 50 years to find that out, or 40 years to find that out.
What was the most surprising thing about serving in the military?
Surprising. How diverse our American culture really is. There was a young man, 18, 19, from Alabama, I think, and it was the first pair of leather shoes or boots he'd ever had in his life. He was just, wow. So the diversity, I grew up in New York City, and I knew about diversity, but it's way wider than what I ever imagined.
Have you kept in touch, or did you keep in touch with any of the people you met?
An old friend of mine I did bump into in Vietnam, but he was the drummer in my rock and roll band. friend from the time we were young teens. I talked to him last night, and we've been in touch since 1962. What's that, 56 years we've been friends? Yeah. No, after Vietnam, I left the country. I thought I could drive to Peru, and I fixed up a Volkswagen pop-top camper, spent a year in Mexico, went to every Maya ruin I could find, and because of a British lady accompanying me, I was able to get into British Honduras, which is now called Belize. I sold my little Volkswagen van, bought a couple of horses, and went out and lived in a grass hut in the woods for 2-3 years.
What did you miss the most when you were first drafted?
Miss the most? I don't know. That's even miss the most. I mean, you're so focused on what it is you're trying to do that you don't sit there feeling sorry for yourself. Oh, well, I wish I was at home in my swimming pool. No. You're focused on the now.
What was your training or boot camp experiences like?
Did you guys play the CD I gave you of Marine Corps training?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, you asked me about boot camp. Somebody gave me a DVD of the boot camp Marine Corps experience, and I would have traded my 13 months in Vietnam for another 13 months in Parris Island in boot camp. We had 3 good meals a day, clean sheets. We got 8 hours of sleep every night, which was important, otherwise you could get hurt. And boot camp, it was the most significant thing of my military experience was going to war.
Describe a typical meal served to soldiers during Vietnam.
Well, we had a tent, which was a chow hall. I was on duty with a military police helmet on, and we had a display turkey, and it was Thanksgiving. Everybody had turkey loaf, which is turkey meat stuffed into a big tin can, and then opened and then sliced. Well, it really irritated everybody that we were looking at a real turkey, a real big Thanksgiving. Well, this guy come running in the chow hall, picked up the turkey like a football, and headed out to chow hall. Well, everybody's going, MPs, MPs, MPs. So me and my buddy, we got outside the flap of the tent and we went, so what? And we went back and finished our dinner. Or, it's maybe, noon maybe. Midnight that night, I was on duty. I got a nice big sandwich, a dark meat turkey sandwich. It was like, yes. But for a war situation, a typical meal, a lot of our food came out of Australia. The eggs were fresh. Now, the Navy eats pretty good. Marine Corps is part of the Navy. And there'd be like grills set up and griddles. And there'd be cases of steaks, cases of lots of eggs. And you'd take an aluminum tray and you'd say, give me those 2 steaks right there and put those eggs on top of it. No silverware, no nothing. No, that's not a bad chow. Australian beef steaks, we actually ate pretty good.
Would you ever, or did you ever revisit some of the places where you served?
No. I never want to smell the place again. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been in the world in terms of color. But water buffalo dew mixed with camphor and fish oil, no thanks. It's a smell I don't want to ever smell again, no. I understand it's developed now, but still. Excuse me.
Did everyone have well respect for each other?
You better. You better. It's about rank. You can have the most idiot first lieutenant in the world, but you still salute him. You were saluting the rank, not him as a person. Now, in Vietnam, it was a little different. You had rank, and then you had status. Your status was how old your clothes were, because it proved you'd been there a while. And if you were issued it, you could wear it. So I've got a picture of my unit, and if you look very closely, you won't find two men dressed the same. Were 3 different T-shirts, 3 or 4 different shirts, 3 or 4 types of trousers, 2 different kinds of boots, and there was no dress code. If you were issued it, you could wear it. And the older it was, the more status you had. Means you were respected for your knowledge. You see somebody that looks like a rat, when he tells you to do something, you go, he probably has a good reason.
Have you joined any veterans organizations?
Yes, I'm a lifetime member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And it's can be very disconcerting about the veterans groups, because some people think they only exist to support the people making the income off of whatever bar they have.
How did you feel the first day your service ended?
Well, I got off a jet in California with a whole bunch of other Marines, and I walked into this metal space building. I laid my records down, and this Marine looked up at me and said, "Marine, you have a choice of doing 2 things. You can finish off the last 5 months of your Marine Corps tour in Cuba, in Guantanamo Bay, or if you sign this medical release, we'll make you a civilian tomorrow." I went, duh. So the next day I was a civilian and came home.
What did you go on to do after the war?
I went back to the place where I'd been drafted, the work I was doing, which was as a research metallurgist in a lab in Indiana. And I just didn't feel like I was able to fit in anymore, so I left. And ended up in British Honduras.
How did your time serving affect your life after war?
I have no way to know, because I have no way to know how it would have been if I hadn't served in a war. That's an okay answer, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, how would I know? What happened happened, and I've had to learn to just get on with it.
Did you have any relatives or family members in the military?
Yes, one of my uncles was with Patton's Army in Europe. My father was a B-29 mechanic who stayed in Texas all through World War II. I had a cousin that flew Hellcat fighters in the Pacific. And those are the ones that are closest relatives.
Did you suffer any long-term effects after serving in the war?
Well, I guess. Being interviewed by you two. If I hadn't gone to war, this wouldn't have been happening, so, No, I mean, I don't have any physical injuries, no physical injuries. This ear doesn't work anymore, and it's probably from firing a cannon, 300 times a day, but it could have happened anyway.
How did you feel after the war was over?
Pretty upset in the fact that the population in this country was lied to about what was really going on. The Ellsberg papers were printed. Nixon, I remember in the summer of 1969, President Nixon looked out over the television and say, "We don't have troops in Laos." And I went, "Our maps were wrong, Dickie." No, the American public was lied to. And some people who ever hear this is going to find this pretty astonishing. I ended up convinced 50 years later that the Vietnam War was a religious war. What? Going through language school, I found out that the entire country was Tao, Shinto, and Buddhist. Only 15% of the country were Roman Catholics. And every government official, everybody the French tried to prop up, and we propped up, were Roman Catholics. The Buddhists would not have gone to war with us now.
During or after your service, do you think the government treated you fairly?
Well, they probably thought so. I tried to deal with the Veterans Administration in the early 70s, and I felt like anybody I talked to was more interested in helping their own career than helping me. It was very discouraging.
What was your family or your friends' reaction to you returning from war?
Oh, we had one hell of a party. Oh, they had a big banner across the front lawn. A couple old girlfriends were there. And the first morning in my father's house, I woke up underneath the kitchen table with all the chairs pulled around me. Second morning, I woke up in the bathtub. What's the safest spot in the house? A cast iron bathtub. You bet. You know, something's got to land in it before you get hurt. If it lands next to it, you're fine. No, I was very, very messed up. The hardest thing for me to do coming back from a war was grocery shopping. You what? There's that long aisle, and there's no place to hide. Because the situation I was in, you were always looking for the next place to get undercover, you know, and there's nothing in a grocery aisle.
How did your war experience carry into your post-war life?
I mean, again, I don't have a way to know. I had a great career. I owned my own business, a machine shop. And I don't know what it would have been like otherwise, you know.
What was your career like after you left the military?
Last paycheck I got was 1973. I was a good humor, jingle, jingle, jangle ice cream guy. And I used that money to buy a Volkswagen pop-top camper thinking I could drive to Peru. When I came back here, I used my education to start a sharpening shop. And I remanufactured professional cutting tools for 38 years. And then one day just decided to quit. Marines don't quit. No, it's just, I had my full. You know, you eat so much and then you stop. And so I closed my business. I don't consider myself retired. I consider, because work is a privilege. A lot of people don't understand that. Employment is a different word. Work is a privilege. If you can't spend at least part of your day helping you or somebody else out, you're one pathetic person. I heard that from a 3-star Marine Corps general. That line, you bet. I heard his retirement speech, and that was the theme of his retirement speech, is work is a privilege.
What advice would you give to someone who is thinking about joining the military?
Don't join the Marine Corps. That's a private it's a joke. Every Marine you will ever meet was told by an older Marine not to do it. It's part of the culture.
At any point during your service, were any of your morals ever challenged or called into question?
My what?
Morals?
My morality? One day, when I was a military policeman, I was squad leader, 2 local Vietnamese policemen came in. bringing two 15-year-old girls with them. They beat one to death. They were getting ready to shoot the other one in the head. And I gave one of my squad members permission to stop him. He got in legal trouble because of it. Two of my squad members, two Vietnamese policemen, were all pointing handguns at one another. It's called a Mexican standoff. And I relented. I backed down. They took this 15-year-old girl in the back of a pile of sand and shot her in the back of the head and threw her into the back of the Jeep like a fish and drove away. My squad member was fined $15, which I paid because I gave him the authority to do it. The lesson was, we have no authority over civilians. If these people want to kill their own children, you may not interfere. Did I and my squad member, Ron, do the right thing? Yes, we did. We did the right thing, but we got in legal trouble because of it. I should have warned you guys. There's a ding-ding in the driveway here. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but did I stand up for my own morality? You bet. You want to see who that is?
What was your happiest or best memory in the war?
A week in Thailand, in Bangkok. You bet. That was spectacular. I got to do a lot of cultural things. You know, the market, the temple of the reclining Buddha. And those are the things I remember most, of the cultural things I did.
What hobbies did you have post-war?
Hobbies? Well, I've fished. And my hobbies have changed, which is, a lot of us consider a healthy thing. It's okay to get interested in something new. I was a currency broker, a coin dealer. I've done all kinds of stuff. But I stuck to a profession. I laugh when I'll ask somebody their profession, I'll get this blinky look. Well, I've been shingling and I was clamming. How about you pick one and use everything else as a hobby? No, having hobbies proves you're interested.
What made you end up on Cape Cod?
My family first vacationed in South Wellfleet in 1922. The summer I was born was the only summer they missed. So I spent my first summer in South Wellfleet in 1949. And everywhere I ever was in the world, I wanted to be here. One of the reasons I'm here is I feel safe. It's not about violence. When I moved here, there was nothing in the woods that could hurt me. Now there is. There's rabies, eastern equine encephalitis, parasitic, bacterial and viral, like Lyme disease. But for Mother Nature to get us here we're situated pretty good. My worst experience in Vietnam was driving a rescue mission through the eye wall of a typhoon that highest gust was measured at 186. To this day, I don't remember 8 of the 8.5 hours. That's how terrifying it was. Your brain, it just seals it up.
Did the GI Bill help you in any way?
Yeah, well, a little. I mean, like I went to college and just didn't feel like I fit in and dropped out twice. But it's a good strategy for some young people to do. I mean, it's a real help to be able to pay for your college.
How do you think the military has changed from when you were serving?
It's volunteer now. People don't get drafted into the military. They volunteer. So military and veterans are treated very, very well today. Otherwise, nobody would join. You can't get drafted today. There'd be an act of Congress in the whole pit. I was talking to the father of an Army major locally, and he says, my son's in Iraq in his Humvee, his vehicle. doesn't have any armor in its door. I said, my Jeep didn't have a door. No, the military's taken care of pretty well today, yeah. There was a typewriter shop downtown years ago, and this guy adopted a little black kid. And the black kid graduated West Point. Nicely done. And years later, I said, how's your son doing? He said, oh, he's a major now. He's in Iraq. And that's when he told me about the Humvee. I'm like, going, what? If I drove by in my Jeep, you could see my whole leg.